Live on mine, live on yours.
Yeah, so we're live.
We are live.
Great, okie dokie.
I shall wait for a bit. What do we need, Andy, for today?
So good morning everyone. So for today's session, you might want to grab yourself just a brick or a good thick book, or a pillow even, something that makes it comfortable for you to sit in this Virasana position with your ankles slightly wider than your pelvis. Your knees can open up slightly here if that feels much better for your hips and your knees, so feel free to adjust that position accordingly. You might also want to sit cross-legged if this one doesn't work particularly well for you. We're using it mostly for our breathing technique. It helps us get a little taller into the spine for those people who are a bit tight in the hips like myself. So Virasana position is a good one for that. Also we get the benefit of a mild internal rotation, which is a good alternative to always being externally rotated in our seated positions. And it's a position we don't often get the hips into in that internal rotation. So feel free to play around with that position, something that works well for you. And then just make sure, so you might want to sit yourself facing up the length of your mat towards the back end of your mat. I'm just using this diagonal here to face you guys on the camera. And I'm just going to rest my hands down onto the thighs. I'm going to sink those hands into the tissue of the thighs, particularly the heels of the hands there, and perhaps even slightly mildly leaning into those hands. So I'm starting to share some of that muscular load through the spine, but also with a little bit in your arms there. Close the eyes. And let's start to focus in on the breathing. So thank you for joining me this morning for this Hatha Yoga session. We're going to be working primarily into the spine and finding some support structure for the spine, so engaging into those core stabilizers. So this practice might be quite beneficial for those of us perhaps that do have issues into the spine, particularly the lower part of the back. But you may even find that if you don't necessarily have issues in the spine, that this practice is a great way of maintaining good spinal health. So I'm gently leaning here into those arms and into my shins, feeling the sitting bones gently moving backwards on that brick or towards the space, more towards your toenails rather than your ankles. And I'm feeling that gives me a very subtle, mild lower spine arch. So not wanting to flatten the back, but feel that there's a gentle arc moving inwards towards your belly button. And then just tuning into the movement of your breath. How do you breathe at this early stage of your day? How can we perhaps iron out the creases of your breathing if there's any juddery moments? And seeing if we can start to slow that breathing down. So we often work in a yoga practice with an Ujjayi pranayama. That's perfectly fine to bring this into your practice, but let that Ujjayi pranayama be a practice for yourself. So not needing to necessarily share the sound of your breathing with your neighbours. Keep it something very internal, very subtle. So that whisper that we can find in the back of the throat is something just for our own ears, our own attention, and to keep our focus inward. Now, whilst we're working with that breathing, we're going to start exploring an idea called firming the spine or stiffening the spine. So that's, or the abdominals, sorry, stiffening the abdominals. And that's a great way of protecting and supporting your spine. So for this, let's allow the eyes to open, keep the breath moving steadily. Now you might want to just try sinking your fingers into a softened belly. And you can just sink those fingers in about maybe 5 to 8 centimeters away from your belly button. And notice if you're finding that quite difficult to do. So you may already be quite rigid into that abdominal area. Perhaps we're even hypertonic, so maybe overly tight into that area. But just seeing if you can sink the fingers in. Then what we're going to do to firm the abdominals is try and engage those abdominal muscles so that they press back into the fingers. I'm not ballooning the belly out, nor am I pulling and sucking the belly in and lifting it up towards the heart. I'm just firming the abdominal muscles, and you should feel that it becomes a little more solid. And that structure is going to really support your spine throughout the session today. So particularly for those of us with lower back dysfunction or tightness or pain in the lower parts of the spine, that rigidity is something that you want to work with throughout every action in your daily activity. And thinking about that activity in the core there as being on a dimmer switch. So for, say, lifting up a pencil, I mean, we might only want to engage that core stability very mildly. But if we're lifting up something much heavier, we want to then really elevate slowly that ability to firm the abdominals to then pick up something a little bit more stronger or heavier. Now we're going to, from here, keeping that mild engagement of our dimmer switch firmness to the core, we're going to come and lay onto the back. So I'm going to lay onto my back surface, legs just bend here so that I can find the feet resting comfortably under the knees, and I'm going to rest my hands underneath the lower spine. So for anyone who perhaps joined me for the yin and yang session the other day, we're taking the same exercise here. We're thinking here that those hands act as a mild support structure for the lower spine. But what I'm trying to avoid here is the spine pushing down. So I'm not thinking of flattening the back or pulling the spine into the floor. I'm just keeping the spine in that wonderful, lovely lumbar arch that helps force move down through the spine. Now what I'm going to do is from here, I'm going to extend my left leg out into space, maybe flex the foot back just to give it a nice feeling of lengthening. I'm going to lift the elbows mildly away from the floor. So that's engaging my pectorals and already starts to engage the front line of the body. I'm taking a slow breath in, and then I'm just going to pick the head and shoulders away from the floor. We don't need to come very high, these are called roll-ups, and I'm simply rolling up a tiny little bit away from the floor, and you'll feel the abdominals begin to switch on. Perhaps you'll even feel that temptation to push the spine into the floor, which perhaps indicates that we're not necessarily working into the core muscles, but we're just working on pulling the spine into the floor. So it's more of an engagement of the buttocks. So what I'm trying to do is really isolate into that core stabilization in the abdominals. And I'm going to lower back down onto the back surface. We'll take this one more time on this side. Slow breath in. And then I'm just going to lift elbows, lift head and shoulders, and sustain that position. So we're training the endurance of that firmness of the abdominals. That firmness, that endurance of the firmness in the abdominals is what we need throughout our day so that we can consistently maintain a nice, strong and stable spine. Lower yourself back down. We're going to exchange that over. So bring the left foot back, the right foot extends out into space. Take a slow breath in. I'm going to exhale, I'm going to firm into my abdominal area, lifting that dimmer switch, head, shoulders and elbows lift, and I'm just sustaining that position. If you like more of a challenge, you can try hovering that right leg away from the floor, but it is almost a needless challenge at this point. We should have enough engagement coming into that core stabilization just from lifting head and shoulders, and release back down. Take one more time here onto that right side. Slow breath in. And keeping that nice, easy exhalation as I firm the abdominals, lift the chest, the head and shoulders. So even within this position, as I'm not lifting so high and I'm not pulling so hard into the abdomen, I can still breathe. And then I'm slowly going to lower myself down. Now be careful here of coming up with a big swing and a roll up. Just move to one side and then bring yourself back up towards a standing position. So find your way up to your standing position. Come towards that front end of your mat. Now what we're going to work with here is a broken down Surya Namaskar. So I'm going to start with the feet slightly wider than the hips, spreading toes out, and equally distributing my weight through those feet. You might even want to try and play around a little bit with the pressing down of the feet into the floor at first. Now your next breath in, slow inhalation, arms come up overhead. Just remain there with the arms lifting. So I'm just reaching up into space. Now this is quite a dynamic position. I'm not completely relaxed, I'm not hanging, I'm lifting up and out into space. Can I bring that slight rigidity into the core stability here as I'm opening up the chest? Now how does it change if we start to allow this chest to open up a little bit higher, maybe looking up towards the sky? And this takes us into a mild back bend, but I can keep that stability and that rigidity in the core, and you'll feel it starts to perhaps even stretch into those abdominals and will support your lovely long lower spine. Now from here, I'm going to start standing myself back up, use my exhale, let the arms lower down. Now trace your fingers along the edges of the thighs. So we're coming to Utkatasana, but I'm keeping the hands, making contact with the legs, and then holding onto the knees. Now it's impossible to have come to a slightly unusual Utkatasana in that position because of the tracking of the hands. So they're using those hands there, particularly for lower spine sufferers, just coming down here and use a little bit of pressure into those hands. Next breath in, I'm going to push further into the hands and try and move the collarbones apart, shoulder blades down the back, and chest is opening. Now with my next exhalation, I'm going to let my spine come forwards, keeping the knees softened, and bring my hands down towards the floor. Now just tune in here, breathe steady. Now notice here, my head actually looks slightly lifted. Now what I'm trying to avoid here is I'm not trying to over-pull the nose into the throat, which I often have taught, but I'm now going to let my neck be a bit more balanced, a bit more released. Nor am I lifting the head forwards and over-shortening the neck. So I'm just finding a position where my neck feels balanced in its engagement. Now from here, I'm going to take my next slow and steady inhalation, and I'm going to step my right foot back into a lunging position. I'm firming into that core stability here. So it's like I'm moving towards a plank, I'm already engaging the core. I'm going to lower down the knee, and I'm going to push into that front foot. Arms move backwards. So here, as the arms move backwards, I naturally can start to use the core stability to lift away from the left thigh. So I'm coming on that nice plank position, or that diagonal line position with the body, and then I'm going to start to lift the chest a little higher, keeping the stability in the core, and let the arms come up. Tuck your back toes underneath. Those who wish for more of a challenge, next breath in, push both feet into the floor, and gather the thighs into the sockets, and that will lift you up to hover in this position. And just remain here breathing steady. If you're down in Anjaneya, perfectly fine as well. Just sinking pelvis further forwards. Search for perhaps the lengthening of that right hip flexor. And I'm breathing steady. Even though my legs, if I am elevated here, start to engage and start to perhaps even shudder slightly, I'm keeping my mind quite calm and steady to overcome the strength that's required here in the legs to keep the mind quite soft. So I'm ready to respond if the body decides that this is enough. I'm thinking about dropping sitting bones towards the floor and pushing the thigh bone backwards to perhaps engage a bit into my right side of the buttocks. Now from here I'm going to start moving the body forwards again. Hands are going to come down towards the floor, and I'm going to step my way back into a planking position. Now from here, engage the core area. So that firmness into the abdominals. I'm going to soften the knees, push back, and come to downward facing dog. We won't do plank lower down for chaturangas yet. We'll look into that mechanic in a few moments. So I'm just going to find my way here into my downward facing dog. Still engaging into that core area of the body to avoid the ribs dropping down. And maybe you can see here, perhaps if you are looking at the video, that I'm not quite lengthened into the legs. I'm finding a position where the spine can elongate, and then perhaps I press the thighs back. And that's going to perhaps lengthen into the knees. But what I'm searching for, you may be able to see here, as I push into the legs, you may see that my spine starts to round. So I'm going to keep the legs a little bit softened to find that elongation into the spine. Now from here, with your next slow breath in, I'm going to lift the heels. Come forward with the weight, and let's lower the knees into the floor. So a bird and dog position. So from here, the right side, we're going to let the right leg reach back, left leg reach forward, and just stay there. Flex the right foot quite strong, maybe even making a fist here with your left hand. Now to sustain this position, I have to again lift the dimmer switch of that core stability. So I can hold and sustain the position. Now with your next slow exhale, let's curve the spine mildly and draw the right knee through and just make contact with the palm to the thigh. And then send it back out. Breathe steady here and sustain the position again. Reach with the heel, reach with the fist or the fingernails. And your next exhale draws you in. One more time. Reaching out into space. Natural breathing to sustain the position. Make sure you're still trying to protract that right shoulder forward. So you're pushing into the floor and keeping the chest engaged. And then the next time we exhale, hand comes down. I'm going to draw the right knee through and see if I can step into that lunging position. Now from the lunge, I'm going to again engage into the stability of the core, lift the arms, open up the chest. Anjaneyya, keeping the back knee down for this one, taking perhaps even a mild back bend. And then from here, body comes forward, hands coming down. I'm going to use the tuck of the toes and step forward. Feet again, pelvis width apart. Soften your knees. Slide the fingers up to your shins and your knees and rest there. Press the shoulders down the back and open up the chest. Now here, without having to work the spine too much, simply move the pelvis forwards and come to standing. Breath in, arms come up overhead. Remain here for a moment. Maybe a mild opening of the chest to the sky. That same feeling that you'd have here, maybe in a very low cobra, or I know that if Izzy's teaching in that kind of forest yoga style, we often tend to do this position with the cobra position with the arms quite forward. It's the same kind of feeling here. I'm pushing into the space in front of me and lifting up the chest. Now with my next breath in, I'm maybe going to return back from any back bending. And exhale, arms come down. Soften the knees, slide them down the thighs. Find stability in the core, lifting up that little bit of engagement. Shoulders down the back. Use your next exhale, hinge and fold. Relax the neck. Now maybe feeling here within this forward bending position that we can really take the stress out of the spine by bending into the knees. Try to avoid that temptation to lock the legs and hang forwards into the muscles of the back. So instead, this is a real release of the spinal muscle, and I'm putting a very slow release and elongation into the back line of the legs. And then from here, I'm going to move into the right foot. The left foot steps back into my lunging position. I'm lifting up that core stability again. So notice if when you step back into your lunges, your belly falls down towards the floor. So keeping that little lift of your dimmer switch of firmness in the abdomen. I'm lowering down the knee, I'm going to push into the foot, arms come back first, lift the chest. And here I'm keeping those abdominals drawn. I'm going to start to lift the chest a little higher, keeping abdominals drawn. I'm maybe going to reach the arms up to the sky, taking slow, easy inhalation. And with your exhale, maybe pull the thighs towards each other and push the feet down to lift yourself up and just hovering there. The lower and the kind of the smaller the gap between the knee and the floor, it will make it much stronger onto the legs. So feel free to lift that up and elevate, or drop yourself, if that makes sense, to elevate the strength in the position. But again, meet the task with that softness in the mind. I'm slowly going to bring myself forwards with the body, and the arms are going to come down towards the floor. I'm going to step my way back into that planking position with softened knees, lifting the abdominals in, and I'm going to lower the knees down into the floor. Bird dog on other side, so left leg reaches back, right arm comes out into space. Now I've got the toe tucked underneath here on the right leg. You don't need to do that. For me it feels better with my kneecap, so feel free to explore that, perhaps even placing a cushion underneath here for those of us who are knee sensitive. With your next exhale, draw the left thigh forward and the right hand meets the thigh. Breath in, reaching arms back out and hold in this position. Holding the position but not holding the breath and keeping myself moving fluidly. Steady, easy breathing. Next exhale, draw the hand through. Gentle press, little press here to help engage a bit more into that psoas muscle to flex the hip. And breathing into this position again as I come back out. And I'm going to lower the hand, draw the knee forward and step again into that lunging position. Soften into the legs a little bit, Anjaneyya. Come on up, lift the dimmer switch, arms go up to the sky, perhaps a mild back bend. So feel free to add that back bend in, but avoid letting go of your dimmer switch. If we collapse here, we run the risk of compressing the lower spine. So I'm lifting up and out into space. I'm going to come forward with my body, hands find the floor, tuck the toe, and I'm stepping forwards. Taking breath in, slide the hands up to the knees, gently sink the weight in here. So you might not be able to see because I've got a kind of baggy t-shirt, but whilst I'm here, I'm still lifting that dimmer switch. I'm feeling how that helps the chest soften. It actually helps me breathe a little bit because I'm able to use that core stability to help draw the chest inwards to fully exhale. I'm going to push the feet down, come to standing. Breath in, arms up overhead. Exhale, arms come down to Tadasana. Long back of your neck. Now from here we're going to move the weight into the right foot. I'm now going to use the dimmer switch to help trigger the lift of the left leg. Now I've got that dimmer switch lifting, I'm going to flex the left foot. Find stability in your standing position. Just breathing steady here in your standing position. Now thinking about that bird dog position, where we would have originally sent the leg back and the arm away, we're going to do that from standing. So I'm sending the left leg back, right arm comes forward, and I use that to step into my lunge. Lift the dimmer switch. I'm then going to come up to my parallel lunge. I'm using this lift here in the abdomen to help bring a sensation of lengthening into the front left hip. Now for those who maybe want to work slightly differently here, you can mildly soften left knee and left ankle. Same feeling here, same principle. I'm moving the thigh bone backwards whilst I'm letting the pelvis stay in its nice equalised position. I'm not letting it tip too far forwards and crunching into the back. And you'll feel that does engage into the buttock there. So I'm bringing that stability into the legs to free up the spine. Now how does it feel here if we want to start taking an arch? Options of course here are to keep the arms long, or maybe even taking a brain cradle. So letting your head fall back into a hammock from your hands. Now check in here that we can breathe steady. Starting to lose my stability in my legs there. But I'm lifting up and out into space. I'm thinking of drawing the thighs into the hips, and that will help you find your stability. Now from here, I'm going to bring the body forwards in space. As I come forward, let your left arm come across the body. Now we're taking a twist here, but lift the dimmer switch first, then go into the twist. That's going to really help you stay true to the twist in the spine from the transverse abdominis. So I'm not taking too much twist here, bringing the elbow down onto the thigh. That's really of little importance. I'm finding stability into the spine and taking twist. Now maybe you can sink a little bit deeper. Maybe you can step that foot back and take a longer lunge. But feel free to alter the position accordingly. Thighs still drawing into the hip sockets. Now I'm drawing that dimmer switch, lifting it a little bit higher. Bring the arms back, moving into Warrior 3. I'm moving forward and floating into that position. So this again is an advancement of that bird dog position. I'm not lifting the arms too high, nor am I lifting the leg too high. It's all nice and flat. And I'm finding that stability through the core of the body. Now start to change like we had in the bird dog. Curve the spine, draw the knee in. Curve the spine, then send it back again, stepping into Warrior 2 position. So I'm turning the left toes out. I'm finding my Virabhadrasana 2. I'm sinking into the right foot here, and I'm thinking of pressing perhaps a little more to the pinky side of the foot. And I'm opening the chest to where feels comfortable for the spine. Don't worry about over-twisting sideways here. Just come to where's comfortable. Now, once you find that comfort, feel the connection between your left wrist and your right knee. Now, can you open that space a little bit more? And this will be the trigger to bring the chest to the side wall, but it comes from a real connection and a stretch coming through that inner line. I'm reaching out into space. Right arm comes up to the ceiling. I'm lifting up that dimmer switch. And I'm coming into Parsvakonasana. Keeping the dimmer switch lifted, side angle position, for those of us maybe who are coming from different lines. But I'm finding the space into two side bodies. I'm not worrying too much about curving the spine. So some classes I will do that with spinal mobility, but for stability, I'm going to find a nice long spine. Side bodies both engaged. Breathing steady. How can we draw those thighs into the hips? how can we still spread the feet into the floor? Breathing steady. How can we maybe relax or move the neck in this position? Now sink a little further into that right leg and press back. Come back to your standing warrior 2. I'm lifting the dimmer switch, lengthen right leg. Trikonasana. I'm engaging the dimmer switch, moving out, moving and feeling that right hip articulating. And I'm going to find the hand down onto the shin. Left hand reaching up and out into space. And breathing steadily. Now this left hand that's up in the sky for me right now, you may prefer that to be on your hip. Anything's perfectly fine. The line of the arm is really irrelevant. I'm using it perhaps as an extension for space if I feel I've got it. But if you're quite tight and you're here, then I wouldn't use the arm, it overstresses the shoulder. So feel free to adjust your position so that your own body isn't overstressed. And now I'm going to soften into that right knee, lift the dimmer switch so the spine is supported, bring your left hand down into the floor, and let's bring the knee down. Spinal twist. Now spinal twist, perhaps a misleading name. I'm thinking of trying to rotate the entirety of the spine. And in turn, it will take a mild twist. You may find that the mild twist is happening to the lower or maybe mid-spine. Maybe if we can bring that arm a little higher, we move the spine into a spiral a bit higher up. Maybe even rotating the neck can add the spiral into the neck as well. But feel that the twist doesn't come at the cost of losing some stability in the spine, that it comes from a feeling of tightening or crunching anywhere in the back. This should feel spacious whilst we have the engagement of the core. And then I'm going to bring that right hand back down towards the floor. Move the right toes out of the way there to step your way back. Lower down onto the knees and bring the forearms down. So a lovely position here of plank. So I'm going to rest those forearms down. Maybe I'm going to have the palms down. Maybe I'm going to interlace the fingers. But I'm going to tuck the toes under and lift the knees. Now as I lift the knees, I really lift that dimmer switch. I really think of pressing elbows down into the floor. Perhaps we need to have the knees down. That's also perfectly fine. But we're just engaging here. Now don't worry if the bum does come a little bit higher. It's not really a measurement of how strong the core is if the bum's down here or whether it's up here, as long as we're feeling that there's some stability going on into that centre of the body. Now I'm going to lean into my right forearm a little more, bring the left hand down, twist onto the right outer edge of the right foot. Side plank here on the forearm. This is a great position for stability in the spine, particularly for people with lower spine problems. It's a position where we get the quadratus lumborum and the abdominals all working in conjunction. So it's a fantastic position. Now you can do this with this bottom arm extended, but it's really not going to have much of a change or a benefit. So I'm going to stay here with the forearm down on the floor. I'm going to come back through centre. I'm going to walk the hands underneath shoulders and move back to down dog. Breathing steady. Now perhaps you're like me and starting to drip sweat on the floor, which is always really nice. And on this mat it will really stand out, so hopefully you can see that on the camera. So sometimes working slower, deeper, perhaps even less dynamic, we find that actually the body works a lot harder. So I'm going to soften the knees, maybe look towards the thumbs. You may prefer to walk, step or jump away towards the front end of your mat. I'm going to slide the fingers up to the knees, rest onto the thighs, roll your shoulders down the back and open the chest. Take a breath in. And with your exhale, lifting dimmer switch, stand. Arms come up overhead, mild arch backwards. Exhalation, soften your knees, arms come down the side, forward bend into that Utkatasana. Breath in, shoulders down the back. Exhalation, forward bend. Relax your neck. Feel the release of hamstrings. Let the weight come forwards. Soften your knees a little further. Take a breath in, firm the abdominals, slide hands back up to Utkatasana, and then press to standing. Lean into your left foot. Right knee lifts as I firm the abdominals. Flex the right foot. Bird dog position. I'm going to soften that left knee, Reach back with the right leg. Left arm perhaps reaches forward just to help you get the feeling for it. Step back, lunge position. Arms come up and lifting up perhaps first. And lifting the front of the waistline. And not thinking of tucking tailbone. And dropping sitting bones down to the floor. And pushing the thigh backwards. And I'm searching to engage that right buttock. So I'm finding that strength and engagement in the right buttock. I've got that firming into the abdominals. Perhaps we want to soften the knee. That can help people locate particularly that right buttock sensation. Maybe we explore back bend. Opening chest to the sky. Maybe brain cradle. Whatever feels most appropriate for you in your spine, in your legs, in your practice. Check that the breathing can still move with relative ease. And we're going to slowly come out from that back bend. I come forwards with the body, but take a twist. I'm bringing the right forearm across to the thigh. Now, don't over-twist this. Don't worry about over-twisting. I'm engaging or lifting the dimmer switch, and then using those transverse abdominis muscles to pull me around the corner. I'm breathing steady. I've got the thighs moving into the hips. And I'm leaning into this position, finding stability in the side body, in the core of the body, in the spine. So the whole trunk is quite firm, quite rigid to support your spine. And then from here I'm going to come back out, find that diagonal, warrior three. I'm coming forwards and floating up into that warrior three. Firm abdominals. Perhaps that right arm, or sorry, left arm here, can come forward if you want to help yourself with that bird dog position in your balance. With your next exhale, let's curve the spine mildly, draw the knee through, soften the left leg, reach it back, warrior two. I'm finding my warrior two, nice wide position, pressing the feet down into the floor. And as the feet press down, I'm drawing the thighs into the hips. And I get almost a feeling of scissoring. Scissor left leg back, scissor right leg forward to help draw them deeper into the hips. This has nice stability. Chest is open, as comfortable as it needs to be towards that diagonal, perhaps, or maybe side wall. And tuning into that connection here between left knee and right ankle. And I'm pressing them in opposition to feel that stretch going through the depths of the body to open up the spine. Reverse warrior. Left arm comes up. Now, temptation here is to drop down into this position here. What I'm thinking of doing is bringing the thigh in, but I'm lifting up the pelvis so that technically I'm not banding too much into the spine. I'm getting a lengthening upwards. Now, from here, Parasvakonasana. Thighs move into hips. Find that side angle position. I'm extending the lines of the arms. Maybe you want to use the forearm. That can be useful if you're feeling a bit weak in the sides, or particularly if you do have issues in the lower spine. And finding the way here to also still engage this right buttock. So it's thinking about moving the thigh bone towards the space behind me, sitting bone moves down. And that engages my lovely firm bottom. Now from here, I'm going to start to press into that left foot, lift the dimmer switch, come back up, warrior two. Lengthen left leg, draw the legs into the hips. Trikonasana. Moving out into that position, and again, find the rigidity in the core. Support your spine. We don't need to overstretch it or over-articulate the spine. If we think of the spine as being a column, we don't want that column to break down into fluid pieces, otherwise it wouldn't support the roof. Now, of course, we know the spine isn't a column. It's made up of many vertebrae. But what we can do is engage those tensile tissues around the spine to help support the structure of the back. Now from here, I'm going to soften that left knee, bring the right hand down into the floor, lower the knee down, spinal twist. So I'm twisting here towards that left-hand side, feeling both side bodies getting longer, pressing through that right hand into the floor, easing myself into the twist, breathing steady, still lifting that core stability. And then I'm going to bring left hand down into the floor. Move the left foot out and step it back. Lower the knees. Let's come down into that plank. So planking position here, lifting the knees perhaps. If that's a little much, stay on the knees. Perhaps the challenge is just to move the knees back. That's also fine. But I'm breathing steady here. I've got those ribs, the front ribs drawing slightly in. I've got that rigidity in the core stability. Now I'm going to move this onto the left side. So I'm going to press further into the left hand, roll down onto the outer edge of the left foot, inner edge of the right foot, and find that stability. Avoid dipping. Keep yourself lifted, and the spine is long. My chest is open, firmness to the abdominals, firmness to the buttocks as well. So I'm really finding some strong stability into the spine. And then I'm going to come back with the hand into the floor. Press yourself back. Let's lower the knees. Now we're going to explore that chaturanga position here. So I'm going to think of this as two movements of arch and curve. So let's just say that as I move the sitting bones back and open the chest, this is what we'll call an arch. And then I'm going to draw the ribs in, and we'll call this a curve. I know sometimes there's a little bit of a difference with how people think of arching and curving, and technically both of these are curves. But if we think of this as an arch, and this as a curve, it helps us out this next moment. So I'm going to move perhaps the knees back, or maybe even lift the knees if you really want a challenge. I'm not even going to demo that option because it's really quite challenging. I'm going to take my breath in and open up the chest, find an arch to the spine. Now with my exhale, I'm curving spine, bend the elbows. Now hover away from the floor. Breath in, arching spine to find up dog or cobra. Now exhale, here's the challenge. Rigidize the spine or the core and come back to a curve. Inhale for arch. Exhale, curve. Inhale, arch. Exhale, curve. Inhale, arch. Exhale, curve, bending arms. Inhale, arch. Exhale, curve. Now that may take a while to coordinate. Inhale, arch. Exhale, curve. Inhale, arch. Exhale, curve. Inhale, arch. This is our last time. Exhale, curve. Inhale, arch. Exhale, curve. From here, walk your hands back. Very nice. Hope you've managed to do that at home. You might want to pause the video if you like and do a few more rounds of that if you want to work more into the chest and shoulders. So I'm going to swing the legs around to the front, find my way into a Janu Sirsasana position. So I'm going to draw the left foot back and drop the foot down, drop the knee down. Now don't worry about the leg being into the thigh. For some it may feel better for the knee and the hip. For others, working more here might work better. I'm going to flex the right toes back. I'm going to lean into that right hand. Now this position is not about, for me, getting down here today. It's not about this position here. It's not even about side bend. I'm finding long, rigid spine. Now I'm going to support my spine with maybe fingertips down, wherever it needs to be, and I'm focusing on this left hip. So I'm going to press the hand into the hip, or into the inner thigh. I'm going to push the inner thigh back into the hand. And you'll feel that triggering your inner thighs. Engage into that position. Start to rigidize the core. How does that alter the sensation? I'm going to take a steady breath in. And with my exhale, release the pull of the knee towards the chest. And just let your hand move the leg further away. And that's going to open into that hip. You may want to repeat that a few times. Pressing the leg back into the hand. Keep the arms strong. Take a slow breath in. And with your exhale, let go of the leg and let your arm move the leg further away. So often tightness in the hips is one of the main contributors to issues in the lower spine. So please make sure here that you're working into the hip, not too much worrying about going in this direction and trying to grab a hold of the foot. Okay, then I'm going to bring myself back, lift myself up, draw the left leg to the sky, and we'll change that over. So I'm leaning into the left side of the pelvis, draw the leg back. Now I have taught this before, try and avoid grabbing and pulling the foot in. Okay, see if you can do it using that firmness and rigidity into the core. Let the leg drop down, find a good position with this arm. It may even be really far back here. That's also perfectly fine. So wherever works best, right hand comes to inner thigh, and pressing the arm down through the thigh and the thigh back into the hand. Now as you press into those positions, also feel that left leg, which I didn't really mention on the other side here, but feel it still reaching out into space. How does this help us to get the sensation of decompression all around the lower spine, simply by focusing on this right leg? Take a breath in, and with your exhale, let the leg sink a little further down. Does it go much further? Don't worry if the answer to that question is no. It may be your inner thighs are quite firm, quite rigid, and it can take time for that muscular structure to change or to accept that we'd like it to change. And then I'm going to draw it back. Feel free again to repeat that movement if you'd like. So always feel that you can pause the video if you'd like to go a bit further with the positions. Now I'm going to, from here, how are we on time? Yeah, we're going to come down onto our back surface, roll down onto your back, let the spine rest into the floor, feel those thighs falling back into the hip sockets. Bit of rigidity here into the back body. So I'm going to spread the toes, bring the palms down. I'm going to push the feet down and move the knees forward. So I'm coming up into that bridge position. Now how can we firm the core in this position? Now with that lovely firm and stable core stability, how can we start to lift the rib cage up and out into space? So be careful here that it doesn't become a back bend, but I'm just lifting, feeling that whole planking surface of the back body here engaging. Perhaps even lifting the arms away from the floor is a good way here of protecting yourself from pushing into the floor to get higher. Instead, I'm using all the muscles in the back body. I'm spreading the bones of the feet, and then I'm going to start the roll down. Feel the spine enter the floor, including that lower spine arch. I'm going to press it down, and then as the pelvis comes down, I release that movement. Now, can we rigidize the core stabilization in the body, but just let the legs lengthen out into space? Now, as we come into this position here, just move my book aside, we're going to flex the toes back to the shins, get a reach through the heels, and then let it relax. Now that little movement of flexing and pointing almost, we're going to now use with a bit of rhythm. We're going to bring the hands onto the belly, maybe lift that engagement mildly, very mild lift on the dimmer switch, and I'm flexing and pointing the feet. And you can see what that does is it sends a wave of movement, a wave of energy through the spine. And it's a way to actually massage out the tissues on the back body. So the skeleton inside the skin right now is being rocked around, and we're trying to loosen up those layers of connective tissue that connect beneath the skin, into the muscles, into the fat tissues, into your bones, wrapping around the organs, wrapping around your veins, capillaries, arteries, all of these things, all these systems in the body, your lungs perhaps even. So just feeling that this movement here is rocking some freedom into all of that connective tissue. And then let's let the rocking go. Now as you sink there, close your eyes, how can you feel the residual effect from that rocking? Can we feel perhaps a mild buzzing into the body? Let your arm bones become heavy. If they're still resting on the belly, that's perfectly fine. Just observe natural breath. Or you may prefer to have the arms out to the sides, or maybe even overhead. But use your Shavasana as an opportunity here for your body to process the various layers of information that we've placed into it through our practice of asana. To let your mind take distance from the duty of observing and controlling the body, and instead using this as an opportunity to build your trust in your body's capability to function without our constant attention. To feel for that supportive surface of the ground and your mat beneath you. And to feel that embrace that comes from gravity rather than a force that we have to oppose or battle against. It's perhaps a slightly easier mentality to change that perception and think about us working with gravity in a friendly union to keep the body safe, to keep ourselves grounded. Take a moment to just soak in the sounds from around you. And slowly start to return our consciousness into the body, wiggling fingers, wiggling toes, and really feeling those movements that we make. Feel the surfaces of your skin move on the floor as you articulate the bones. Taking a stretch, reaching the arms overhead, then rolling onto your left-hand side perhaps here, and finding the most efficient way here, slow elevation of that dimmer switch into the core of the body, and then press your hands into the floor to lift yourself away from the ground. Now you may prefer to come back to a seated position following our practice, or maybe come back to your Virasana, your hero's position, sitting onto your brick perhaps. But just find a position where you can keep that mild contraction of your dimmer switch. Feel what that does to help support a tall, free spine. Leg bones nice and heavy, just resting down. Skull floating with ease on top of your steady and stable spine. Bring your hands together in front of your heart and thanking yourselves for your practice this morning. Namaste. Thank you all very much for joining me for this Hatha Yoga class this morning. Thank you all very much. And just another note again, as usual, so these classes we're providing on Instagram are of course for free, as you can access them, but following the practice we will then upload them all onto our YouTube channel. For that, I know that some people have had issues trying to find that channel. If you just type in Bodyworks Holland as one word into the search on YouTube, you should find it there, and there's a picture of me and Isabel sitting on the floor looking at anatomical charts, and that's the channel. And you can subscribe to the channel, or you simply just observe the videos. Following that, if you've enjoyed the practices, if you've joined us for practice, we do ask that you make a donation to our Bodyworks Holland initiative. It's essentially to support both me and Isabel at the moment in our freelancing, as of course we're not working so much in the studios. So any support for that is really greatly appreciated. So we do really kind of respect that, of course, at these times it's difficult with everyone for finances and things. But any support is really greatly received. Thank you all very much and have a lovely day ahead of you. Feel free as well, guys, any questions, you can always post them to us after the session. So if you do have questions, we'll not straight away turn the live feed off. So if you do feel that there's any questions,